Be a general contractor?
So a general contractor would apply specifically to the building trades, and it's distinguished from a specialty contractor. Someone just asked me what kind of a contractor I was and if I did roofing. And so in every state's different, the way the licensing is done, but it's all relatively similar, but it's done at the state level. So in the state of Alaska, you can have a general contractor's license with a residential endorsement, or you can have a general contractor's license without a residential endorsement. And so in order to do residential construction, you have to have the residential endorsement. If you were strictly a commercial general contractor, you wouldn't need the residential endorsement. And that is, the residential endorsement is another layer of licensing that's required, and there's education necessary. And then general contracting means that you're contracting people, hire you to perform building construction services. And the difference between a general contractor and a specialty contractor might be a roofing contractor, a foundation contractor, a sheetrock contractor, a tile contractor. You can get into even some more specialty trades like being an electrical contractor or a mechanical contractor that also require another layer of education and licensing. And they have, there's, kind of the more advanced you go in that, the more licensing that's required, the more fees that are required. So as a general contractor, we look at the big picture. People hire my business to perform work often from the dirt, which would be a civil contractor. If someone who's dealing with dirt is considered a civil contractor, an excavation contractor. And so we manage the entire project from conception, planning, design, through permitting, and then through construction and completion. And we manage a lot of the specialty contractors. So I have to hire civil contractors, those are the dirt guys. We perform our own foundation work. We do all of our own framing, which is erecting the building, whether it's steel or wood, roofing. We do a lot of our own roofing. Andy is a specialty contractor, and Andy is a roofing contractor that specializes in a very small portion of the business, right? There's a lot of different types of roofs you can put on buildings, and Andy specializes in one. And that's the one that I don't like to personally self-perform. We do all of our own metal roofs, which is the vast majority of what we do. But when we get to composition or asphalt roofs, I prefer not to do that. And I like to hire a guy like Andy to come in as a subcontractor for my business and perform that work. So a general contractor organizes and manages, you work with the architects, you work with the government agencies that give you the permits, you work with the owners and the clients, and then you work with all the subcontractors along the way, whether that's, like I mentioned, electrical, mechanical, which would be plumbing and heat, and spray foam contractors. There's a lot. We're doing a job right now for Heritage Coffee. We're building Heritage Coffee, kind of a new flagship location out in the valley, and then there's IT. She has all of her information technology, all of her IT, data, communication, right? That's another contractor that's a specialty contractor that deals specifically with her point of sale system. Her audio won't be much visual, but so that there's music in the store, and security and internet and phone and all that kind of stuff. So that's general contractor is managing the big picture.
You guys have any questions on that? So then, customer typically comes to you with a building they want built, and you essentially supervise that, coordinate all the subcontractors. One of the aspects of the assignment they're working on is like, how do you get paid? How do you, Seth, get paid?
That's always a really good question.
Yeah.
The number one goal of what we do is to do the work and then hopefully get paid. unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way. So, but how do we get paid? So what we do is there are different types of general contractors, and once again, I mentioned we do both residential and commercial. There are some guys that just do, or some gals and guys, businesses that just do commercial, and then there's some that just do residential, and we do both. We're known as what would be considered a design build contractor, as opposed to a lump sum or fixed price contractor. So some contractors, typically commercial only, will bid a job where an architecture firm or the city of Juneau or the state of Alaska or whoever puts out a request for a proposal, an RFP, or a bid, and then multiple contractors will competitively bid on the job, and it's just based off the specifications of what are in the plans. And that's not generally what we do. We're considered a design build contractor. So what Andy mentioned is a client will come, an owner, a potential client will come to me, whether it's residential or commercial, and they will want to, they need to understand how to get their project going. You know, a lot of times people hire my business before we hire the designers and the architects. And then I help them create the project from the conception to the completion. And so what we do is and it all starts with budget, right? Like, budget is the number one thing. It's what does the owner, what do they want to spend on this project? And so, and before we start design, it's like, well, what approximately what is our budget? Because we want to make sure we design something that fits their budget. We don't want to over-design something and then have them not be able to afford it and have to go back to the design table and redesign. But that does happen. So budget, budget, budget. And then as we work through design, we start coming up with a budget, which is a lot of stuff I already talked about, which would be, there's general conditions, which is, mobilizing onto the job, maybe fencing, temperate sanitation, cleaning, general labor, all this kind of stuff. Then you get into your civil work. Then you get into your concrete work. So once again, civil work being all your dirt work, utilities, concrete, then masonry, then steel, then woods and plastics, then thermal and moisture protection, and the list goes on down the line. And then we start putting budget numbers to it. So we create a spreadsheet, and each spreadsheet could be comprised of labor coming from within my business, could be coming from labor from a subcontractor, materials, equipment necessary that we have to rent to do that one portion of the work, and then that one line item will have a budget associated with it. And there might be 120 or so of these numbers over here that equal a big number at the bottom. That's the total of the job. And so once we start a job, our jobs are typically 6 months, 12 months, 18 months long. So we're on this job for a while. And then what we do is we bill against that budget. So, and we bill monthly. And so every month you look at all your costs that have come in, and everything is coded to match that budget spreadsheet. And then we bill according to what all those costs are. And then during that process, we're able to monitor the budget. We can see if we're over budget or under budget on a certain line item as the job progresses. And I've got people in my office who help me do all of this. And so, how do we get paid? So when an employee goes to Valley Lumber and they buy something from Valley Lumber, that gets emailed over to us, the receipt, and then it gets put on my desk. And then I determine what it is and what cost code goes to it. And then I give that to my accounts payable person, and she enters it into our financial software, our accounting software that we use. And then once a month, I have this other person in my office who runs what's called a job cost journal, and it grabs all of those costs, and then we can import that into a spreadsheet that becomes an invoice. And so we submit an invoice to the owner or the client approximately every 30 days, and hopefully they pay. We don't. Sometimes you have to fight for your money, so people don't always want to pay. So, but that's how we get paid.
And it's roughly so. And then you mark it up, things up roughly 15%, and that's okay.
Yep. Yeah. So there's so once again we talked about design build, and which is also could be considered cost plus. So the way we set up our projects, it's the cost of the work, even though it's all very detailed. It's not just kind of a big number. It's a bunch of little numbers, and then it's the cost of the work plus the markup. The markup is profit and overhead. So profit would be just what it sounds like, is the money that you take home at the end of the year, hopefully. Overhead is what it costs me to run my business. So a lot of my employees are billable. So if I have my employees in the field, the ones that are wearing their nail bags and doing the work, you know, I charge profit and overhead on them, and it helps me, and then it helps pay for what we're doing. There are people in my office that, like the person that does accounts payable and the person that does invoicing, right? Those aren't directly billable expenses, so I can't take their wage from their labor and directly bill the client, right? Well, like I can a carpenter. I can directly bill the carpenter for 1 hour of time, but I can't directly bill my office staff. And so I need to charge enough of my profit and overhead to cover my office staff's time. I own a building that then my business rents from me, because my business needs to rent from somewhere. And so that's overhead. Company vehicles, my company has 7 trucks that I let my employees drive, and I pay for their gas, the insurance, the maintenance on the vehicle. So these are all my lead individuals, the guys that are, you know, help me run the business and run the employees underneath them, and that's all overhead. I can't directly bill for that, so I need to mark up the costs in order to cover all of those expenses.
So this is awesome because to date we've talked about hourly rate that carpenters or plumbers might make. So I think this, like the entrepreneurship aspect of this, is really important for you guys to hear. So that doesn't make like $40 an hour. Like, it's a totally different business model for you guys to kind of be aware of here. So
yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yep.
Can you tell them a bit about how you got your start?
Yeah, and as Andy mentioned, you know, I kind of went a non-traditional path. There are more formal, traditional ways of getting into construction. You could start, you know, there's programs, you know, like I never took classes like Andy, like you guys are, like Andy's teaching here, and I never had that opportunity when I was growing up. And then there are other opportunities where I did go to college. At the college level, you could study construction management, right? As a degree. You could get into engineering and other avenues that lead into a contracting world. And there are specifically construction management degrees you can go get, master's degrees, bachelor's degrees. And typically if you came out of a program like that, you would end up working for a big company, some large, probably multi-state construction company that operates in multiple states, like big firm, where they need a bunch of construction managers, right? That's not what my company is. So I got my start, like I said, I went to college, and wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I was really interested in skiing and mountaineering. And so I went to the University of Oregon, and while going to school there, they had an outdoor program. And so I got involved in that. And my mom's a psychologist, and so I was like, well, I'll go, you know, follow in my mom's footsteps. And you know, I got a degree in psychology, and but then I got introduced to this outdoor program, and so I graduated, and I ended up getting a job as a ski guide. And so I started guiding skiing in the winter, and then I started guiding kayaking in the summer, and I became an outdoor guide. But you know, you're only going to make so much money doing that, and it's fun. It's something I'm passionate about. It. I still do it. I guide skiing to this day. I have a 30-year career as a ski guide. It's what I consider my hobby career, but it used to be a full-time job for me. And what happened was I was like, well, I'm not, you know, I want to do more. I need more money, right? Like being a year-round guide isn't going to, you know, make it for me. So I started doing, I stopped guiding in the summer, and I started doing construction in the summers. And I continued guiding skiing in the winter, which a lot of, especially on the smaller scale of things, a lot of construction companies slow down in the winter. So it was a good fit. I'd go guide skiing in the winter, and then I'd do construction in the summertime. And I started out just as a laborer, doing all the worst jobs you could imagine, with a broom, a shovel, in rotten crawl spaces, in attics with insulation, just all the worst jobs you could ever imagine is how I started. But I loved it. I loved building things. I loved working with my hands. I loved how things are tangible, right? Like you get a result at the end of it. It's something you can touch and feel, right? It's not this conceptual result that you've come up with. And so I fell in love with doing construction. And so I just started working for more and more contractors, and this was all pre-internet. This is back, I'm dating myself now, this is like before the internet. I know it's hard to imagine, but even a guy like me lived when there was no internet, as an adult even, yeah. So, what point behind that is I got a subscription to Fine Home Building, which is a trade magazine, and the Journal of Light Construction, and I bought construction books, and I literally started to teach myself construction by reading magazine articles and these books, and then also working for contractors who taught me a lot, and I just picked it up along the way. And then I was working for this guy, and he was a residential home builder, and his name was Gary, and I was like, Gary, we could, I'd worked for him for about 4 or 5 years, and I was like, we could start doing more work, we could take on more jobs, and I could start running, you could take more work, I'll start running jobs for you. And he wasn't interested in it. He's like, no, I just like doing one house at a time, right? I don't want to get too big. I don't want to deal with all those headaches and everything. And so I was like, all right, well, I do. So I started my own construction business when I was about 30 years old, and just started doing decks, small jobs, little additions, little remodels, little repairs, and then it just grew from there. Yeah. And so now we're doing, now I have 25 people that work for me. I've been in business for over 20 years, and we're doing, millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of work a year, and we're busy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Guys have any questions on that? No? All right. This is great.
Go ahead.
Go.
So as a general contractor, you're just managing the laborers who are doing the work in the field, and you're just managing them? Or are you also
Yep.
working?
I mean, it's a bigger than that, but yes. I mean, in a nutshell, I'm a manager of the business, but a manager of people, a manager of information. To build a building, whether it's a school or even a little deck, or there's all these little parts and pieces that go into it, and that's one of the things I really enjoy about it. Construction is problem solving. I mean, even the most thought out set of drawings, plans that someone can design for something to be built are never 100% accurate. You never have all the information you need, and then there's constantly problems that arise along the way, and so you are collecting information, right, and storing it, making sure we have it available to us. In fact, case in point today, on Heritage Coffee, and that job got shut down. We were about 90% design when the pandemic hit, and so we shut it down, and then we resumed it about 1.5 years later, and everybody's brain, everybody'd already moved on to different jobs, and now we're circling back around to this project, and because it's a restaurant, the owner was dealing with DEC, which helps regulate all the kitchen stuff and everything, and DEC had asked for a mop sink to be moved. But due to the fact that we had 1.5 year layoff and all this stuff, that information never made it to where it needed to go. And so, I was in Heritage Coffee this morning, and I noticed that there was a hole that the plumber had drilled in the floor for where the mop sink was going to go. And I'm like, oh, that's not where it's supposed to go. It needs to get moved over into this little closet. And so I had to mark that up on the drawings, email it over to the subcontractor, and make sure we're all on the same page. Is a big part of doing the work, is just managing all of this. It's not just managing the people, and there's a hierarchy of workers, you know, from laborers all the way up to super specialty employees and contractors, but it's managing the information and making sure that everybody has the information they need to do their job correctly. Because there's nothing worse than tearing something out and redoing.
Yeah. Cool. And then there's the customer too that you have to deal with.
And then there's the customer. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
some pretty nasty ones out there.
They're not all created equal. Yeah.
So if these guys are considering maybe getting into general contracting, what would be like maybe a couple pieces of advice or something? What's the most important aspect, character aspect, would you say that these guys need to develop and work on?
Well, yeah, so, you know, kids, a couple things. One is just being, you know, passionate about whatever it is you decide to do. I've had another talk with one of Andy's classes before, and whatever it is, you know, don't just do something to do it, right? I mean, you might do that if you're not sure and you want to experiment and find something that you're passionate about, but, you know, I became passionate about construction, and that's what led me to be successful in it, is because it's something I really enjoy and I care about. And so, you know, I think a lot of people in this day and age are going out and it's like, well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, right? But you want to find something, whatever it is, it's something that you want to do, right? If you can do that, you're going to be successful. I guarantee you. If you find something that you want to do and you care about it and it excites you and you're motivated by it, like you're going to do something with it, right? You know, and that doesn't necessarily mean become super wealthy. It just means be successful at your career, right? You know, some careers you can make a lot of money, some careers you don't. It's really more about, you know, doing your job and doing it well. So with that being said, general contractor, yeah, just a lot of details. It's a very detailed and, you know, detail-oriented position, and a lot of people skills. You got to have a lot of, you know, you interact with a lot of people all day long. You know, whether they work for you or you work for them, you're constantly interacting with people.
We're working on like emailing and that skill, but do you ever do emails? And
I live in the world of email, and the reason why I live in the world of email is because, I mean, it's a great form of communication. You know, sometimes people start talking and you can just talk on and on and on, and it's like our time's valuable and et cetera. But the other aspect of email is that it records the conversation, right? Like you have, and I was responding to you about how important all this detailed information is, and we went back into an email regarding this mop sink that we had to move, right? You know, and so I prefer email over text, you know, as far as like business communication. Text is fine as far as I'll meet you there at 10, or you know, grab that, to one of my employees, grab that pile of wood and move it over there or whatever. Text is good for that. But if it's any sort of communication that needs to be stored and cataloged, email is by far above the only way.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And then my last question is, can you just rattle off a few tools you guys use? It could be technology, you know, computer programs, actual equipment and machinery.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's all the obvious things that you see, all the heavy equipment, the excavators, the big forklifts, the lifts that lift people up in the air to perform work up high. You know, we do use a lot of heavy equipment. We use lasers to make sure things are plumb level and square. We use obviously power tools. The power tool technology is way behind, you know, a lot of the rest of the world we live in. The cordless tools are just now starting to become robust enough that we don't need extension cords anymore, right? This is relatively new, just in the last few years. I mean, construction's way behind the times when it comes to technology. A lot of stuff is still old school. Technology though, so I have project management software, and all my main employees have iPads. So pretty much all the guys that get a company truck also get a company iPad, and in that we download, you know, my office staff puts all this information in there. All this information I've been telling you is super important to keep track of. The plans, but not just plans, specifications, what color of a sink is it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all that goes into this iPad. And then the employee, and these are the guys that are running the jobs, They can be on the job and they can just go right into that iPad. They can pull up that project. They can pull up the plans they need, whether it's a mechanical drawing that they need to work with a plumber on, or a fire suppression or anything like that. So the iPads have, you know, gone a long way. Yeah, I mean, I used to do, all this was done in paper. We had a 3-ring binder on the job, and you know, you'd have to print it up, take it to the job, and now it can all be done in the office. We can get that information out. And then the other aspect of that is getting information back to the office. It's a big, you know, communication's a big part of this, and that dialogue of getting information into the field, which is where the guys are doing the work, and then getting the information, you know, back to the office is also extremely critical. And so guys fill out a daily report form. And on that daily report form is, you know, how many employees were on the job today? What subcontractors were on the job? What did the subcontractor do that day? What was the weather like? Well, the weather's automatically generated in this because if we have delays, right, it might be like, well, yeah, we had Taku winds for 3 days and we couldn't put metal roofing on because it's dangerous, right? You know, so, and then if the 6 months later, the customer's like, well, why are we 3 days behind schedule?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, look, right here, we had this 3-day Taku event and we couldn't work those 3 days. So that's why we're 3 days behind schedule. So it's really important. Another one that, you know, the guys put on their daily report forms is, I own a bunch of equipment. Like if we go rent a piece of equipment, that's easy to track because we get an invoice from Tyler Rental or Bobcat or CMI or whoever it is. But for my own equipment, I own 8 pieces of heavy equipment, and there's no chip on it that shows it's being used, right? So if the person doesn't fill that out in their iPad, and then if we don't bill for it, well, now I'm basically renting my equipment to my customers for free, right? And then I have like an $8,000 repair on it because the heavy equipment is expensive to maintain.
Yeah.
And so if I'm not billing for it because no one got that information back to the office, then that's coming out of our profit, right? So communication, iPads been a big one, and then of course we have software. We have accounting software. So we're not doing it old school, and I have a person, being a design build contractor, a person that works in my office who does design, and that's another type of software where you can draw in. People maybe heard the term like AutoCAD or something like that, where you can design in a computer. And so I pay a subscription to have a subscription to that design software. So, but the field itself is still, to be honest, it's pretty old school. Yeah. The way we build things hasn't changed a lot, actually. How we run the jobs has changed a lot. Yeah.
What's the name of that project management software?
We use FieldWire. Yeah. And there's a lot of different companies out there. We experimented with a couple different ones before we settled on FieldWire. Yeah.
I have a question for you,
Yeah.
Seth. You said you guys use lasers to make things plumb, level, and square. Can you
Yeah.
talk about what those things mean?
Yeah, well, plumb is vertical, right? And that's, think of like a plumber's pipe, you know, draining down. So like if you were to have a plumb bob is an old term, where you have a string and a weight, right? And if you just hold that string, and that string is going to, with that weight underneath it, is going to be completely vertical to the earth we're standing on, right? You know, and so we want these walls to be plumb. We don't want them to be leaning out a little bit or leaning in a little bit, okay? So that's plumb, but now we can use, in the old days we used a plumb bob, but if it was too windy, the wind's blowing your plumb bob around, right? You know, okay, so I've experienced that. And then, so now we can use a laser where it's a dot, and it hits the ground here, and it hits the surface up there, and from that dot to that dot, it is perfectly plumb, right? And then we can use them for level of the same way. There's dot lasers, there's rotary lasers, there's line lasers. So for like the civil work, when we're doing dirt work, we use a rotary laser with a little receiver that's about the size of a
Chalk eraser.
Yeah, it's the size of your phone, you know. And there's a laser that spins around that you can't see with your eye. You don't see it unless you get right in the line. But if you're looking at it, you can't see it. And then you have this. We have a stick with measurements on it, you know, inches or tenths. Dirt workers usually work in metric, not imperial. And then you put your you know, it's like, well, we want the dirt to be at this elevation, and so, you know, the bottom of that stick to wherever that laser's set up is going to be the same no matter where you move it, and then the excavator knows where to grade that out to. And then some lasers can also do square, right? You know, so like, And square doesn't necessarily mean like a rectangle. Like if we were to be wanting to build this room right here, we want it to be square, which means that we don't want it to be a parallelogram, right? We want it to be right angles, right? We like straight lines, right? I mean, unless something's meant to be curved, I think there might be a roof over here that's curved or something like that, but that's a design element. But that roof, that curved roof still needs to sit on a level surface that's square to itself and square to that structure that's sitting on top of it. So, yeah, so plumb level and square to within 1/4 inch is our standard, yep. And we can use lasers for that now, yeah. We can also use calculators. Like I could tell you what the diagonal is, talking about technology, and in the old days you actually had it's a Construction Master Calculator is what's called, that's a brand. But now you can just get the app. So now you have the app on your phone. You don't have to have this secondary device. And you know, if I were to say, I can look at the plans and say, okay, well, you know, if this is 47 feet, 3 inches, 3.5 inches, and this is, you know, 17 feet, you know, 5 or whatever, right? I can do 17-foot 5 run, 43 foot whatever rise, and then I can put the diagonal, and it'll tell me what the diagonal's supposed to be. So then I can take a tape measure and I can go from this point to that point, and it's better read what my calculator just told me, because the numbers don't lie. Math doesn't lie. Yeah. So the errors are made from the people doing the work. Yeah. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is there's a lot of problem solving, some mathematical thinking.
Yeah, a lot of math, a lot of critical thinking, and critical path thinking, right? Like item X can't happen until, you know, item A happens before it, right? You know, there's a certain path that you have to take in this process, and a lot of that's just you learn that through experience. You could learn it through school, but you know, going back to what Andy was talking about, moving, you know, like you can learn stuff, but then you have to go out in the real world and actually do it, right? And that's where it's going to make sense, right? Is when, you know, you can learn it in school, you can learn it in a book, but once you get out to the field, out into the real world, and you start to learn, and you learn how the mistakes are made as well, right? You know, like people inch themselves.
I've been guilty of that.
Yeah.
More times than I'd like to admit.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah.
Do you guys have any questions for Seth?
What level of degree would you say is needed for this job?
What's that?
What level of degree would you say is needed for this job?
What level of degree? Like a college degree? Well, so like I said, you could, I would say, to be honest, like there is no requirement that you have a college degree to be a general contractor. So, you know, unlike being a teacher, you have to have a college degree to be a teacher, right? To be a physical therapist, to be you know, any sort of medical profession, attorney, you know, there's lots of professions out there where you have to have a college degree to do that work. To be a general contractor, there is no requirement that says you have to have a college degree. With that being said, you know, I think that there's a lot to be gained from that college experience. And there are specific degrees, like I said, there would be, you know, a construction management degree would be, you know, quote unquote, probably the most specific degree to being a general contractor. You could have a business degree, because once again, being a general contractor is, and you mentioned earlier, you know, I'm an entrepreneur, right? I'm a business person, and I've created this business. No one handed it to me, and I started from scratch with hardly anything, and I've built it up through the experiences I've had and learning, you know, how to be a good business person, right? And it's entrepreneurism. So a business degree would be a good degree to be a general contractor, yep. Or even, you know, accounting and finance, because that's a big part of this business is accounting. So those would all be applicable. And then once, you know, engineering, you know, any other degree, or even design, architecture, you know, all these other degrees that relate to the construction field, the construction industry. Yeah. So, like I said, I have a degree in psychology, which, you know, I deal a lot with people. I mean, I deal with people constantly, and so, you know, having that ability to interact with people and try to understand people and is also a big a big part of the business. You know, I'm not saying that a degree in psychology is, I would probably the other ones I mentioned first, but you know, but what college did for me, you know, regardless of my career was, and what I did with my degree was, it taught me how to, because once again, I'm a different generation than you guys, right? You know, I mean, really, you know, word processing, you know, that was not big when I was in high school. You know, that was all just developing, right? And then just time management, being responsible for doing your homework, showing up to class on time, doing your assignments, you know, learning to multitask, you know, operate under pressure, make sure you're, you know, getting your assignment, you know, studying for your test, getting your assignments turned in on time, you know, whether it's biology, history, you know, and just being a knowledgeable, educated person, just in general, and learning how to, I think, you know, what college helped me with was learning how to grow up and be an adult and manage all of that stuff, and the skills, you know, like I said, email, communication. I mean, I do that just all day long, and going to college really helped me develop those skills, just in general. Yeah. So.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about getting a general contractor's license. I know every state is a little bit different. Can you talk just a little bit about what that takes in the state of Alaska?
Yeah, so in the state of Alaska, it's very easy. You could become a general contractor by filling out the application, getting a insurance policy, because you have to prove to the state that you are insured. Just like if you're going to drive a car, that car needs to have insurance on it. It's required. It's a state law. And then pay the fees to the state, which are not that expensive. And then you would be a general contractor without a residential endorsement. So there is zero training involved, zero level of any validation that you have the skills necessary to do that work. Yeah, so.
So that's a warning when you hire a general contractor.
Yeah. Now with the residential endorsement, so this is where they're trying to protect the consumer, right? I.e. the homeowner, because they figure if you're doing commercial work, you should be smart enough. If you're going to hire, you know, if you're hiring a contractor to do commercial work, you're probably already enough ahead of the game to be able to vet your contractor, right? You know, but in residential work, what they're trying to do is protect the consumer, the homeowners out there, from, you know, either untrained or unscrupulous, you know, contractors. And so there is a level of education and training and a test you have to take. And then you have continuing education every 2 years. You have to take 16 hours. You have to have 16 hours of continuing education to maintain your residential endorsement.
But there's no actual, I'm just out of my own curiosity, is there no actual like work experience necessary for that residential?
There's no work experience necessary.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty easy to do, and anybody could go take that class too, right? It's a matter of taking the class, passing the exam, and you're done. I mean, you could have zero construction experience, go take a class, pass the class, and now you are a general contractor with a residential endorsement. So not a high degree of, vetting or verification of contractors' qualifications in the state of Alaska. Other states are different, yes.
All right. We'll get you out of here, back to work.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, thanks for
Yeah.
coming.
Thanks
no
very
problem.
much, Seth.
Yeah.
Let's give him a round of applause
Yeah.
again. Thank you, Seth. Really appreciate it.
See you guys.
Have a good one.